There is a moment, quiet and almost imperceptible, when you realize that you've been trying so hard to manifest something that your very effort has become a kind of silent confession. Not a confession of desire, but a confession of doubt. And as you listen now, let your breath slow down, because this beginning is not about learning something new, it's about remembering something ancient inside you. The truth is that the harder you push, the more your body whispers, "I don't have it yet." Neville warned about this friction, not as punishment, but as a gentle mirror showing you where your inner world is still arguing with itself. So let the words settle in your chest, as if they're speaking from the part of you that already knows the path home. Maybe you've been carrying a quiet tension for years, the sense that if you don't control every detail, nothing will happen. That if you don't visualize the right way, if you don't repeat the affirmation with enough emotion, if you don't feel that spark instantly, then everything will collapse. And deep beneath that urgency lives a fear you haven't wanted to look at, the fear that what you want might not come unless you fight for it. So you push harder, you do more, you try to force the feeling of being fulfilled, you try to perfect the technique. Yet with each attempt, something inside you tightens, your breath quickens, your shoulders rise, and the moment the emotional strain appears, the manifestation becomes a task instead of a state, a spiritualized form of anxiety, a beautiful intention wrapped in silent panic. And you're not wrong for feeling this. You're not failing, you're not broken. You're simply forgetting who you are when you try to earn what already belongs to you. This is the inner battle almost no one talks about, the conflict between wanting the desire and becoming the one who naturally has it. It's the gap between the dream you adore and the identity you still wear. It's the difference between wishing for abundance and breathing as someone who already lives in abundance. And this dissonance has nothing to do with intelligence or worthiness. It's a pattern your nervous system learned long before you knew the power of assumption. As Bruce Lipton teaches, your body follows old emotional programs even when your mind declares a new intention. So part of you reaches for the future, while another part clings to the past. You may not realize it, but the pressure to feel it real is one of the greatest traps on the path of manifestation. When you chase a feeling, you're quietly telling yourself that you're not already the one who has the desire. Neville never asked you to chase emotion. He asked you to assume the end, to rest in it, to allow it. Yet so many people turn this into a performance. Did I feel enough? Did I visualize correctly? Did I do the scene right? And suddenly the technique becomes a ritual of fear instead of a doorway to identity. The more you try to force a specific sensation, the more your body contracts. The more you monitor yourself, the more your heart whispers, "It's still far away." This is not your fault. This is conditioning. This is survival programming. This is the old self trying to keep you safe. But listen closely, because this is where everything turns. The block you think you have is not in the method. It's not in the visualization. It's not in the affirmation. The block is the resistance inside you that appears when you try to make something happen, instead of letting it unfold through who you are becoming. Manifestation responds to identity, not effort. When you try to do it right, you step out of the end. When you release the pressure, you return to the natural state that creates effortlessly. This entire journey we're beginning together is not about learning more techniques. It's about dissolving the friction that has quietly kept you in the state of wanting rather than the state of having. So as this introduction closes, let your breath soften again. Let your shoulders relax. Let the space around you feel wider. You're not here to force an outcome. You're here to remember the version of you who already lives in the reality you desire. And in the next chapter, we begin unraveling the first hidden layer, the paradox of effort, and why trying harder only reinforces the very absence you're trying to escape. There is a certain heaviness that enters the body when you try to make something happen with sheer mental force. You may not call it heaviness, but you feel it in the breath that turns tight, the chest that subtly contracts, the mind that begins scanning for danger instead of resting in certainty. This is the hidden blockade most people never recognize. The moment manifestation becomes a performance, your inner world shifts from being the creator to being the one begging for evidence. And in that shift, something essential is lost: the naturalness, the quiet knowing, the identity of someone who already has. You begin to do manifestation instead of being the version of yourself who embodies the end. And the more you push, the more your energy whispers the opposite of what you intend. There is an overlooked truth that blends both psychology and the teachings of Neville. The mind doesn't respond to how much you want something, but to what you assume about it. When you try harder, your brain interprets the effort as proof of absence. This is the essence of what could be called the cognitive effort paradox. The moment you strain, the mind says, "This must be missing, otherwise we wouldn't be working so hard to obtain it." Your nervous system, your subconscious, your emotional memory, they all register effort as alertness, not fulfillment, and without realizing it, you create a loop where the very intensity of your desire keeps you locked out of the state where the desire is already real. You might feel a sting of recognition in this, because there have been times when you convinced yourself that pushing harder was a sign of devotion, that repeating one more affirmation, visualizing 5 minutes longer, or summoning more emotion would finally unlock the door. Yet these moments were not alignment. They were signals of the internal gap between who you believe yourself to be and who you desire to become. Every time you strained, you were unknowingly revealing the contradiction in your identity. The old self still whispering, "I'm not the one who has this," even as your mind tried to imagine the opposite. There is no judgment in this awareness, only clarity. A clarity that dissolves the fog and lets you see the invisible pattern you've been repeating. If you pause for a moment and breathe softer, you might notice that when you simply assume the end, your body behaves differently. The internal dialogue quiets, the breath drops lower, the emotions lose their frantic edge. This is what happens when identity leads instead of effort. To taste this shift, let yourself step into the 2-minute identity drop-in, not as a task, but as an inner posture. Imagine softly, without pressure, the version of you who already lives the outcome, not trying to feel anything dramatic, not forcing a surge of emotion, but letting your body borrow the posture of someone fulfilled. Letting your breath match theirs, letting your inner tone match theirs. 2 minutes of becoming instead of hours of chasing. This is the difference between strain and assumption. And perhaps the most revealing image is this: a locked door never opens by rattling the handle harder. You could shake it, kick it, pull at it with all your strength, yet the resistance would only intensify. The door opens when you stop forcing and use the key. A quiet, simple movement that aligns with how the door was designed to function. Manifestation is the same. When you force, everything tightens. When you assume, everything aligns. The key is identity, and the more gently you turn it, the more naturally the door opens into the reality that has been waiting for you all along. There is a subtle trembling that appears inside you the moment you begin watching your own manifestation, as if it were a fragile experiment. You may think you are being attentive, but beneath that attentiveness lives an unspoken fear. The fear that if you are not constantly checking, something might slip away. This is the hidden blockade, the quiet tightening that transforms every technique into a test. You visualize and then immediately scan your reality for signs. You affirm and then observe your emotions to see if they changed enough. You meditate and then judge the session like an examiner waiting for a score. And in that moment, the assumption dissolves. You step out of the fulfilled state and into the state of monitoring, a state that whispers, "I hope this is working," instead of, "This is already mine." What few people realize is that this constant self-observation activates a loop in the brain that modern neuroscience would describe as the dopamine monitoring loop. Each time you check for progress, your nervous system shifts from receiving to anticipating. Anticipation is not embodiment, it is a state of waiting, and waiting stretches time, heightens anxiety, and amplifies the sense of lack. Your whole inner landscape becomes a cycle of expectation without arrival. Neville spoke about this indirectly when he emphasized the need to feel the wish fulfilled rather than to look for evidence of the wish. Because the moment you look for evidence, you confirm to your subconscious that the wish is not yet a fact. You turn fulfillment into a future event instead of a present identity. You may recognize this pattern in the way you sometimes finish a visualization and immediately ask yourself, "Did I feel it enough?" Or, "Will something happen today?" In those moments, you are not in the end state. You are standing at the edge of it, peering in, hoping for a sign. Monitoring yourself keeps you locked in the personality of the one who is still trying to manifest, instead of the one who already has. And this creates a quiet suffering. Because your intentions are sincere, your heart is open and your desire is real, yet a part of you keeps looking over your shoulder to check whether the universe has heard you. This is not failure. It is merely a misunderstanding of how assumption works. Assumption requires rest. Monitoring is tension disguised as spiritual discipline. Now imagine what happens when you step out of this loop for a moment, not as a technique, but as an experiment in trust. A full day where you deliberately avoid evaluating, analyzing or measuring your manifestation. A day where you do not check signs, do not examine your thoughts, do not assess your mood to see if it matches your desire. Just 24 hours of simply being the person you have assumed yourself to be. No performance, no self-surveillance, only presence. This kind of pause is not about ignoring your desire. It is about dissolving the anxious pattern that made you believe you needed to track your progress in order to feel safe. The safety comes from identity, not observation. And the best way to understand this shift is through a simple image. Seeds do not sprout while you hover over the soil. The seed does not open because you check on it. It opens because its environment allows it to. Growth happens in stillness, underground, in the quiet, where no eyes watch. Your manifestation responds to the same law. The moment you stop hovering, the moment you stop watching for signs of life, the moment you allow the process to unfold without gripping it, reality begins to reorganize itself around your new identity. And what once felt slow or stagnant begins to move with a natural rhythm that was always there, waiting for you to stop monitoring long enough for the seed to breathe. There is a moment, usually unnoticed, when you think you are stepping into the version of you who has the desire, yet your body continues behaving like the version of you who doubts it. This is the hidden blockade. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, almost tender in how it holds on to the past. You affirm abundance while still checking your bank account with the breath of someone afraid. You visualize confidence while shrinking in conversations as if your voice has no weight. You imagine a loving relationship while bracing for disappointment in the smallest interactions. The old identity isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It simply lingers in your micro-behaviors, in your posture, in the way you walk through a room, in the subtle patterns you repeat without realizing they contradict everything you are asking for. And this inner contradiction has more power over your reality than any technique performed from the wrong state. What lies beneath this is what psychology refers to as the Galatea self-image effect. In simple terms, your subconscious does not respond to the desire you think about. It responds to the identity you quietly believe in. It expects you to behave in ways that match your current self-concept, not the one you wish you had. This is why the old personality feels so persistent. You can spend 10 minutes imagining wealth, but if you spend the rest of your day acting as someone who is financially anxious, your subconscious honors the behavior, not the visualization. Neville spoke to this when he said that you do not attract what you want, you attract what you are. The law bends to identity. The universe responds to the frequency of self-concept long before it responds to the words you speak. And here is the shock that is often difficult to admit, yet profoundly liberating once seen. You can visualize the end perfectly and still live as someone who does not believe they deserve it. You can see the dream vividly in your mind, yet carry the emotional residue of a self who is still navigating scarcity, rejection, or unworthiness. There is no shame in this. It is simply the old energetic blueprint expressing itself. Many people blame the technique, thinking they need a new method, a stronger emotion, a more precise scene. But the truth is that the old identity quietly cancels the new reality unless the inner posture shifts. Visualization is not enough when behavior contradicts it. Assumption is not enough when daily micro-choices deny it. The contradiction is subtle but powerful, and once seen, it begins to lose its hold. Imagine then directing your attention toward 3 small behaviors in your day. Not grand gestures, not dramatic changes. Just 3 movements where the old self still shows up. Perhaps it is the way your shoulders tense when you think about money, the way you apologize for taking up space, the way you delay decisions out of fear. These are not flaws. They are simply remnants of an identity that believes it must survive rather than receive. When you notice these small behaviors, something remarkable happens. You begin to reshape your lived identity from the inside out. You begin to match your inner world with the version of you who already has the desire, and the subconscious, always loyal, always attentive, begins to follow the new script rather than the old one. A simple metaphor reveals this dynamic with clarity. You can repaint a room in fresh colors, but if the foundation beneath is cracked, those cracks will eventually return to the surface. The paint is not the problem. The foundation is. Your techniques are not the problem. Your identity is. The cracks are not failures, they are invitations. Invitations to strengthen the inner self you bring to your manifestations. And when the foundation shifts, when identity aligns with desire, the external world reorganizes itself with breathtaking precision. The room holds its form. The paint stays smooth, the reality stays stable, because the inner structure is finally aligned with the outer dream. There comes a point on the spiritual path when the very tools meant to liberate you begin to feel like obligations. It happens slowly, almost elegantly, without declaring itself. You start visualizing, not because you are embodying the end, but because you feel guilty if you skip it. You repeat affirmations not as the voice of your new identity, but as a way to calm the anxiety that whispers beneath your ribcage. You meditate not from presence, but from fear that missing one session will set you back, and in these subtle shifts, a hidden blockade begins to form. The technique becomes a ritual that soothes insecurity rather than a doorway that expands identity. You end up performing spirituality rather than inhabiting the consciousness it was meant to awaken. What unfolds beneath this is a form of emotional substitution that many seekers mistake for discipline. The mind uses the ritual to avoid confronting the deeper misalignment within. You promise yourself that if you just visualize longer, feel stronger, speak louder, your desire will finally click into place. But the truth is gentler and more revealing. The unease is not asking for more repetition, it is asking for alignment. A technique performed from anxiety only strengthens the very state you are trying to transcend. Neville never intended for his teachings to become checklists. He intended them to become identities. Assumption is not a performance, it is a return to self, and anything done to escape a feeling is rooted in separation, not fulfillment. This is why you may have reached moments in your journey where you felt exhausted by your own spiritual routine. You may have sensed that despite the hours spent affirming, journaling, visualizing, something wasn't shifting in the way you hoped. You were sincere. You were devoted. But a part of you used the routine as a shield against vulnerability, against the discomfort of truly stepping into the identity that your desire demands. That discomfort is not a barrier, it is a passage. And when the routine becomes a comfort blanket, the deeper transformation pauses. The technique becomes noise and the inner voice becomes quiet. Not because you are doing anything wrong, but because you are using the outer ritual to avoid the inner rebirth. Imagine then releasing all techniques for a single day, not as rebellion or avoidance, but as an invitation for identity to take the lead. When you drop the rituals, even briefly, you reveal something essential, who you believe yourself to be when no technique is holding your hand. Are you the one who is becoming, or the one who is still seeking? Are you the one who has assumed the end, or the one who is afraid to stop moving because stillness feels uncertain? These questions are not meant to challenge you. They are meant to free you. When you step into a day without techniques, you give yourself a chance to feel the end state without the machinery that used to carry you to it. You discover that the state is not created by the ritual. It is created by the self who lives beneath the ritual. And the best way to understand this shift is through a simple metaphor. Consider a map. In the beginning, it is helpful, necessary, even comforting. It shows you where to go. It guides every step. But once you arrive, carrying the map everywhere becomes unnecessary weight. You do not need directions for a destination you are already standing in. Techniques are maps. They help you remember where you are going. But the moment you arrive in identity, in the consciousness of the fulfilled self, the map becomes extra. Not wrong, not harmful, simply no longer needed in the same way. And when you release that weight, even briefly, your inner world begins to reveal the truth that was always waiting beneath the performance. The destination was never outside you. It was always the self you were becoming. There is a kind of inner trembling that has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with memory. Not the memory of events, but the memory stored in your body. You may speak abundance with your lips, while your chest tightens as if expecting loss. You may imagine love with clarity while your stomach braces as if preparing to be hurt again. You may declare confidence while your shoulders fold inward as though still carrying the weight of old wounds. This is the hidden blockade most people never recognize. Your mind may accept a new reality, but your body is still living in an old one. And until the two become congruent, manifestation feels slow, inconsistent, or painfully out of reach. This is where the wisdom of neuroscience meets the simplicity of Neville's teachings. Your body holds emotional patterns long after the mind chooses new intentions. Bruce Lipton speaks of this through the lens of cellular memory, but you have experienced it intimately without scientific terms. You have felt moments where your thoughts say yes, while your body whispers no. Moments where your heart contracts even though your logic insists you are safe. This is somatic memory imprinting, your nervous system repeating the emotional signatures of your past as if protecting you from a danger that no longer exists. And without realizing it, you end up manifesting from survival instead of identity. You create from contraction rather than assumption. There is a quiet truth here that can feel confronting at first, but deeply freeing when understood. Manifestation rarely fails because your mind doubts. It fails because your body refuses to release its old survival patterns. You cannot embody wealth while your body still reacts as though resources are scarce. You cannot embody love while your body prepares for heartbreak. You cannot embody ease while your body lives in vigilance. This is not evidence of weakness. It is evidence of adaptation. Your body learned these reactions to protect you. It memorized them. It repeated them. It built reflexes around them. And now, as you step into your new identity, that old programming rises like ghost shadows, not to block you, but to be acknowledged and released. If you allow yourself a slow breath right now, you may notice that fulfillment carries a different rhythm than longing. Fulfillment does not rush. It does not contract. It does not brace. It settles. It softens. It makes space. This is why the shift you are seeking begins not with intense emotion, but with emotional neutrality. The moment your body relaxes into the assumption, truly relaxes, your manifestation moves from effort into inevitability. To enter this state, you do not need to force a feeling or generate excitement. You simply sit with the version of you who has the desire until your body stops resisting it. Not through pressure, through presence. Through repetition of being, rather than repetition of technique. Through letting the nervous system acclimate to a new emotional climate. And perhaps the simplest way to understand this is through a metaphor you already live every day. Imagine a computer with updated software but overheating hardware. The new programs are powerful, precise, and ready to function. But if the machine is still running old internal processes, it crashes despite the upgrade. Your mind may have updated, new beliefs, new understanding, new images of the future. But if your body is still overheating with outdated emotional responses, the system struggles. This is not a flaw. It is a signal, a call for integration. When the hardware cools, the software runs effortlessly. When the body aligns, the mind's vision becomes reality. And when the nervous system finally believes you, manifestation stops being something you try to do and becomes the natural expression of who you are. There are moments when your desire feels vivid, almost within reach, yet a quiet tension rises inside you. This is the subtle blockade. You want the outcome, but you do not yet see yourself as the one who naturally lives it. The longing is real, but the self-image beneath it is still shaped by old patterns, old fears, old emotional signatures. And without realizing it, you try to place a new reality inside an identity that was built for survival, not fulfillment. This is where the self-determination model becomes a lived truth. You act from who you believe yourself to be, not from what you wish to achieve. A person who feels prosperous behaves differently from someone trying to become prosperous. The same is true for love, confidence, creativity, and abundance. When identity lags behind desire, the desire doesn't bring alignment. It highlights the distance between your current state and your imagined one. But everything shifts the moment you define the fulfilled version of yourself in one clear sentence. A sentence that feels like a quiet recognition, not a performance. When this inner definition settles into your body, the desire stops feeling like something ahead of you. It becomes a natural expression of who you already are. And just like an archer whose bow finally aligns, your direction stabilizes. The path no longer requires strain. The identity guides the outcome. There are moments when your intention is clear, steady, and sincere, yet your emotions drift into old patterns as if pulled by an invisible undertow. This is the hidden blockade. You decide on the outcome you want, but the emotional echoes of who you used to be continue shaping your inner world. They rise in small waves: the sudden worry about money, the quick tension in the stomach, the old fear of disappointment. These emotions are not signs of failure. They are remnants of past identities, neural emotional residue still living inside your body. This residue creates a quiet contradiction. You may affirm abundance, but a subtle heaviness lingers as if waiting for the past to repeat itself. You may visualize love, yet tension forms around your heart, as though it remembers every moment you felt unseen. The inconsistency is not about your desire. It is about the emotions you have not yet released. They pull you back into the state you're trying to leave, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because the body is loyal to what it has known. Transformation begins when you learn to recognize these emotional echoes and trace them gently to their origin. And the moment you replace the old response with the emotional posture of the fulfilled self, the residue begins to dissolve. What once felt like a tug of war becomes quiet alignment. Think of it like standing in a canyon. Long after the original cry has faded, the echo continues bouncing against the walls. Your old emotions behave the same way, but once the echo settles, the silence that follows becomes fertile ground for a new state to take root. There are moments when you reach for the feeling of your desire and instantly sense yourself chasing it. That chase is the hidden blockade. The more intensely you try to feel something, the more you affirm that you don't naturally live in that state. This is the effective striving loop. Effort amplifies absence. Neville never taught emotional performance. He taught quiet, inner acceptance. Fulfillment begins with the slightest shift, the minimal feeling that matches your assumed identity. Not intensity, but familiarity. Just as a ship moves through the night with a single steady breeze, your manifestation moves through the softest, genuine alignment, not forced emotion. There are times when your desire feels delayed, not because it is far, but because you keep measuring the distance. This is the hidden blockade. The more you monitor time, the more you shift into anticipation instead of embodiment. Anticipation is waiting, and waiting reinforces absence. Temporal perception theory shows that longing stretches time. Neville understood this. Imagining toward the desire makes the journey feel long. Imagining from it dissolves the journey altogether. When you release the timeline and experience the desire as a quiet inner memory, not a future event, the pressure fades. And in that timeless state, movement finally begins. There is a moment when the inner struggle softens, and without effort, the desire stops feeling distant. This is the hidden sign. People expect excitement, but true alignment appears as calm neutrality, not indifference, integration. The identity has settled. This reflects cognitive assimilation. The new self feels natural enough that your mind no longer searches for proof. You act from the end without trying to. Your emotions steady, your choices align, and your intuition speaks with quiet confidence. Like a river finding its natural course, movement becomes smooth, unforced, and undeniably your own. The block was never the method. It was the state behind it. There comes a moment when you recognize that the struggle was never about the technique. It was the state you carried beneath it. Neville taught that assumption replaces effort because reality responds to identity, not performance. Most people feel frustrated not from doing the method wrong, but from doing it in a strained emotional posture, shaped by old subconscious patterns. When the state shifts, everything softens. Calm expectancy replaces urgency. Your self-concept steadies, and manifestation stops being something you chase and becomes the natural expression of who you already are.